Now we're going to cross live to Birmingham to Reform's conference where Richard Tice is due to speak. But first, Nigel Farage has got the floor.
Tin, lead, zinc, nickel. I used to come and visit the West Midlands a lot. I used to go visit the Northwest a lot, the Northeast a lot. Nearly every one of the customers that I was trading with 25 years ago is no longer manufacturing in this country. They've gone. They've closed down. They're part of the industrial massacre that has been taking place in our country. And it continues. And it continues. I remember in 2015, when the primary steel plant in Redcar, up in the northeast, closed, and a government minister said, well, there's one good thing about this. At least it will reduce our carbon emissions. Well, what happened? Tata moved all of the production to India, where the steel was produced under lower environmental standards, and then the products were shipped halfway across the world back to the UK market. And that is what we've been doing. We've been deluding ourselves that we're reducing CO2 and saving the planet, when actually what we've been doing is exporting CO2 production, exporting UK manufacturing, exporting well-paid, good jobs. And I genuinely fear that with Mr. Miliband very firmly ensconced in the government, the fanatical rush to net zero is going to make that even worse. We have the highest industrial energy prices in the world. Over 4 times the average price of energy in America. And actually in parts of Texas, we're probably 6 to 7 times the unit price cost of electricity for manufacturers, for businesses, let alone the increased cost for consumers. So this is a crazy, crazy period that we're living in. One of absolute self-delusion. And I'm, by the way, not going to pin the blame for this entirely on the Labour Party. After all, it was Boris Johnson who said we were going to become the Saudi Arabia of wind, and Mrs. May, remember her, who wrote net zero into law without there even being a proper debate and vote in Parliament. Despite that, there are companies like this that work hard, do well, and succeed, and good for them. But there should be many, many more of them. And what I want to say on a business front is that unlike the Labour government, and by the way, there's nobody in that cabinet, nobody, who's ever set up a business, who knows what failure is like, well, they do in some regards, but who knows what failure is like and success is like, because that's what business is. You set up a business, you take a risk. There's no guarantee of success. And many people have business failures before they succeed in a big way. That actually is have a go Britain. And I think with people like myself, Zia, Yusuf, who I was with yesterday, and Richard Tice, who you're about to hear from today, at least we've got some people who've been out there in the real world, know how difficult it can be, but actually understand what it is to make the monthly payroll. Right? I know what it's like after a bad month to make the monthly payroll. When the staff are earning still good money and you're earning nothing, you're losing money. I know what it's like. There's no experience of that in government. There's frankly precious little on the opposition benches either. And there are some that will characterize this. Oh, well, of course, Reform are on the side of the business owners. Reform aren't on the side of the workers. No, the two are mutually beneficial. It is people taking risk, setting up businesses that succeed, that means those that work in those businesses do well, have good pension pots, and all the rest of it. This idea that you're either on the side of the worker or the business owner, frankly, is outdated. It belongs to a different time, a different political argument. The two work together. What we do know is we will go bust as a country if the public sector continues to grow and the private sector continues to shrink. Now, we did last week lay out the beginnings of our shadow cabinet. The idea was we would dispel with the myth that Reform was a one-man band, to which I always said it's far better than being a no-man band. But we've expanded enormously, and since then we've heard from Robert Jenrick, since then we've heard from Zia Yusuf, and today we're going to hear from the Deputy Leader of Reform, now heading up a big super economics and business department, BTE, business, trade and energy, because they can't work without each other. So ladies and gentlemen, to put some fresh ideas into this country, into investment, into a different approach from government, welcome to the stage, please, Richard Tice.
Every time your phone connects to public Wi-Fi, anyone nearby could snoop on what you're doing. Hackers can steal your information, passwords, photos, and bank details in just seconds. ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. ExpressVPN is so easy to use. With just one click of a button, you're protected. Streaming, banking, or shopping, you can switch between high-speed servers worldwide in seconds, and your connection never slows down. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free, all backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your online life today.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. It's great to see you, and thank you, Nigel. And thank you to Glyn, Henry, and all of the team from USP Steel. It's amazing to be here in this factory, this incredibly successful, the largest independent processor of steel. And I feel very sort of passionate about steel. I just want you to picture the scene. A few years ago, I'm at a railway station in deepest rural India. And I look down at the railway tracks, and there are those immortal words, Sheffield Steel, 1895. And a sort of patriotic pride just went through my whole body, from my feet right up to the top of my head. It was extraordinary. I'm not sure we quite have the same patriotic pride now when people say, aren't we good as regulators? And didn't we do well with all our quangos and our compliance departments and our HR departments? I'm not sure that's what we call progress. And maybe that's part of the problem, ladies and gentlemen, because we're now becoming unproductive and our economy is flatlining. It's not growing at all per person. We're actually getting poorer. We're now in recession. And that's why we have to have a completely different approach. Because I think we all know that our economy is broken. 30, 40 years ago, we were growing at 2.5% to sometimes 4% every year. It's a good feeling, but there's no prospect of that if we carry on as we are. And that's why it's right to have a new super department covering business, trade, energy, including industry and housing, because we have to think about this in a joined-up, coordinated, strategic way. And it does make sense that actually you have successful business people who've been around the block a few times, who've succeeded, who've had some challenges, but who know what's required in order to drive growth, profitability. And that's the key difference between Reform and all of the other parties. I've probably got more housing experience than the last 20 housing ministers put together. And I just want to touch on today 4 really important things. Firstly, regulations, trade, energy, and then finally, the opportunity for a huge new British sovereign wealth fund. Now, yes, regulations are not very glamorous. How often do you sit there filling out the forms online, offline, thinking, do I really need to do this? How many known as the sucker of last resort? No surprise they're not meeting the benchmark. We can change all of that because we can be poacher turned gamekeeper, acting on behalf of the British taxpayer. And one of the reasons, of course, they're underperforming is because they're investing in a whole load of woke nonsense. And when I look today, one of these funds, investing in a sustainable equity fund, missing its benchmark, not by 0.5% or 1%, by 5% in 1 year. This is insanity. Instead, we can transform this into a British sovereign wealth fund, proudly paying all of the members and pensioners, of course, whilst patriotically backing Britain all of the way. And of course, the rights, the benefits and the entitlements of all of the existing members, absolutely rock solid, identical. In fact, they're even more protected under this proposal. But there's already a huge surplus in these funds. The liabilities are under £300 billion. And what we should do is we should, of course, look after the existing members, but say to new employees of councils, you'll join a new defined contribution scheme akin to the best of the FTSE 100 pension schemes. That, of course, makes sense. So by closing these schemes to new joiners, the liabilities over a few decades reduce, and that is the right thing to do. What it also does, that allows one to cut the existing employer contributions on the existing council funds to around 10%, saving councils millions and millions and millions of pounds every single year. And as head of Doge, that's what, of course, we're very focused on. Our good friends, the press, rarely want to point that out, but these are the sort of savings that we can do because we are best in class. This sovereign wealth fund will have the best in class professionals running it. And it might be invested, rather like the Norwegian fund, in 75% equities, mainly listed, some unlisted. About a third of that could be in the UK. That would be an increase of over £100 billion of investments into the UK stock market, which would mean more confidence, higher valuations, more new listings. That keeps businesses growing here. You know, the growth capital, absolutely vital. 10% could be invested in UK bonds, and then 15% could be invested in local infrastructure and hundreds of thousands of affordable homes across our towns, our villages, our local areas, and our regions. For each of these funds, that could be, on average, up to £1 billion of extra renewal and regeneration investment in just a matter of a few years. That's the opportunity, as well as, coming back to steel, the opportunity to invest in some critical strategic national assets like the importance of primary steel, British steel. And that's why this fund could actually own British steel. It could renew, reline, refurbish those 2 blast furnaces ready for the next 60 years. That's how we can ensure that great businesses like this one are buying British steel and not steel from overseas. That surely is the right thing to do. This sovereign wealth fund, it could generate an annual surplus of between 20 and 30 billion pounds a year for more investment into growth companies, for more investment into renewal and regeneration across our regions. This is such a huge opportunity. It's an absolute game changer. This could be one of our greatest legacies that reform essentially brings to the United Kingdom. It'll drive prosperity. It'll drive growth. But I guess we won't satisfy everybody. I guess there'll be a few people who may not like this idea. I just ask you to think about what's their interest? What are their vested interests? Are they making money by actually ripping off the British taxpayer? Well, we're looking after the British taxpayer, as Robert said last week. We will look after your money. And this is one of the right ways to do it. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, the opportunity for a huge new economics and business department covering business, trade, and energy. The opportunity to reindustrialise Britain with bold British companies, the opportunity to re-motivate Britain with the brightest British entrepreneurs, to re-energise Britain with beautiful British oil and gas, marvellous, and to rebuild and renew Britain with this British sovereign wealth fund. This is the way forward. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the best vision with the best people. It's the best plan. If we do this, we can make our families more prosperous, we can make our communities more prosperous, and our country more prosperous. Family, community, country, the core values of reform. Because we all know this is the only way to fix our broken economy. And only reform can fix broken Britain. Thank you very much.